In a place where every breath you take is a dance with death, the true stories that unfold within hospital walls will change everything you thought you knew. In this video, I will share with you 3 incredible events witnessed by doctors and nurses that push the boundaries of the mind. From the final whispers of accident victims, to the miracles of invisible bonds, and the lonely souls that emerge during the night shift. What if the scientific truths you trust most suddenly vanish into thin air? Would you believe that the human spirit continues to write its own story, even after death? Chilling prophecies uttered by a patient fighting for survival. A telepathic connection that saves a sibling's life. And a mysterious visitor who comes every night to drink soup in the hospital's dark cafeteria. These stories will not only terrify you, but also shake your belief in the power and immortality of the human soul. Close your eyes, open your ears, and listen to the whispers echoing through the corridors of Metropolitan Hospital. Because tonight, the real horror begins. Story 1. After the accident. The ambulance sirens echoing through the corridors of St. Mary's Hospital were like the background noise of every night I spent as an emergency medicine resident. That night, however, the city had never faced such relentless rain. As lightning split the sky, the roads were as slippery as an icy mirror. As the clock neared midnight, the shrill announcement from the radio by my bedside pierced through my sleep. Major chain reaction accident on the highway. I quickly grabbed my equipment and ran to the ambulance. When the ambulance doors opened, the first patient brought in was David Chen. In his mid-30s, with thick hair plastered to his forehead, his face covered in blood and mud. He had collided with a truck coming from the opposite direction on the highway. His skull crushed between the twisted metal debris of the wrecked car, fighting for his life. He was unconscious, and his vital signs were rapidly weakening. Without a moment's hesitation, we rushed him to the operating room. Neurosurgeon Dr. Williams and his team were performing a delicate procedure, using scalpels and needles in a precise dance to save his life. We were all in the midst of a great struggle. The surgery stretched over 4 long hours, as time seemed to dissolve within itself. In that dark, dimly lit room of neurosurgery, every breath we took seemed to cling to David's next breath. Finally, as the first light of dawn broke, Dr. Williams emerged from the operating room door, his weary yet triumphant eyes echoing the words, "We did it." David was being taken to intensive care, a faint glimmer of hope. His condition was stable for now. Everything seemed perfect for us. Yet a deep anxiety within me weighed heavier than fatigue. That night felt like we had endured a battle that had lasted years. David was clinging to life in room 302 of the intensive care unit. In that cold, sterile world, dominated by the sounds of machines and beeps. The monitors displayed every rhythm of his fragile life, counting every beat. His vital signs had miraculously returned to normal, but his consciousness remained closed. His family had come, all worried, especially his wife Linda. Linda's eyes held an ocean of worry, and her 8-year-old son Kevin's face bore a sorrow his father did not know. They waited silently, hoping he would wake up at any moment and come back to them. On the second day, David's condition underwent a promising change. He was opening his eyes, able to comprehend simple commands, and even responding weakly. However, what he said stirred a cold suspicion within me. Whispering, he kept repeating, "There was someone else in the car. Where is that man? We need to save him too." The frightened and anxious tone in his voice made it seem as though he had truly forgotten someone in the car. The police report I read immediately after the accident clearly stated that David was alone in the car. So were David's statements untrue. That's why I attributed his statements to confusion. "You may be confused, David," I said, trying to sound calm. "You were alone in the car," but he insisted, clutching the sheet with his weak hands. "No, doctor, there was an old man there. He looked very pale, as if his soul was leaving his body." The deep fear and seriousness in his eyes showed that he meant what he was saying. And this defied my logic. I was on duty the 3rd night. The hospital's quiet corridors echoed with the weight of midnight. At 2:15 a.m., Nurse Jennifer's panicked voice echoed through the corridors. Out of breath, she said, "David is very restless. He keeps screaming, 'That man is here.'" My heart pounding in my chest, I rushed to David's room. He wasn't in his bed. He was standing in the corner of the room, pointing at the empty space with a trembling finger. "There. "Can you see him?" he shouted, his voice trembling with despair. "The old man. He's looking at me. He's touching me." I looked at the corner, but all I saw was a cold, white, empty wall. There was nothing there. I tried to calm David down, using the gentlest tone of my voice. "There's no one there, David. You're safe. It might just be a dream." But he wasn't even listening to me. Yes, he died in the accident too. He died with me, but I came back. David's eyes were literally shooting fire. His hands were shaking. He was in an uncontrollable state of agitation. I had no choice. I had to give him a sedative. Under the influence of the medication, he slowly calmed down and fell into a deep sleep. But I couldn't relax. What he had said was more than just a claim. It was like the whispers of an invisible truth. The next morning, Officer Martinez appeared in the corridors with his official stride. He had come to take David's statement. "We re-examined the accident site," he said, his voice filled with seriousness. "We found something odd. Near the wreckage of David's car, there were belongings that belonged to someone else. They seemed to belong to an old man, a wallet, glasses, and an old-fashioned cane, ... My heart began to flutter in my chest like a bird. "What about the body?" I whispered. Martinez shook his head as if to say no. "We didn't find any body. We're waiting for the DNA results." Were David's whispers real? How could a nightmare turn into such concrete evidence? That evening, I visited David. His room was filled with an odd sense of peace, despite the hospital smell. There was no trace of yesterday's madness in his eyes. "Doctor," he said, his voice low, as if sharing a secret. "I was right about that man, wasn't I?" "How did you know?" Without waiting for an answer, he continued, "Because he spoke to me last night." "Thank you," he said. "Thank you for not forgetting me." "What did he say to you?" I asked, my voice trembling involuntarily. David's eyes drifted off into the distance, as if peering through an invisible curtain. His name was Harold Thompson. He was 73 years old. He was going to see his son, but his son hadn't visited him in years. He was very lonely. When he died in the accident, no one noticed, as if he had never existed. His words echoed not only in the hospital room, but also in my soul. When the DNA results came in, the shockwave I felt engulfed my entire body. Harold Thompson, 73 years old. 3 days ago, a report of a missing person was filed. His son had started searching for him years later, but it was too late. The belongings were indeed his. David's words, which had once seemed like the ramblings of a madman, had now turned into a cold, hard truth. After David fully recovered, he found Harold's son, John Thompson. Years of silence, anger, and pride had built thick walls between them. David told him about his father's final days, his loneliness, and that last accident. A deep sense of regret shadowed John's face. "I wish we had made peace," he whispered, his voice choked with sorrow. A week later, Harold's funeral was held under the gray blanket of the sky. David was there too. "He saved me," he said, his voice a whisper. "I was alone in the accident, but he was there with me. We returned together, but he sent me on." My eyes welled up involuntarily. What David said defied logic, but it carried a truth that resonated deeply within me. Since that day, every time I enter room 302, I feel a slight shiver in my subconscious. Sometimes, it feels like a faint shadow passes by the corner, a momentary cold breeze. But I no longer fear it, because I know that Harold is not a malevolent spirit. He is simply a being who does not want to be forgotten in this world, searching for a small corner to call his own. In this profession, I have learned that death is not always the end. Sometimes, it is a beginning, especially in cases of sudden and unexpected death. Souls may struggle to find peace, wanting to tell an unfinished story. Keep these things in mind while working in a hospital. Every patient has a story, and sometimes those stories continue even after death. Show them respect, listen to them, because perhaps they simply want to be understood, remembered, and freed from the weight of their loneliness. Story 2. Dr. Geller's sister. Dr. Robert Geller's name was spoken with respect in the corridors of Methodist Hospital. Everyone knew about his experiences and achievements at the hospital. For 15 years, as a cardiologist, he had not only treated hearts, but also touched the hearts of his patients and colleagues. However, there was something far more valuable to him than professional success. His family, especially his sister Lisa. 32-year-old Lisa was a teacher. A cheerful, single soul who had dedicated her life to children. The bond between the siblings was as unbreakable as a chain. That Friday morning, there was an unusual look of concern on Dr. Geller's face. Even in the hospital's cold atmosphere, I could sense his inner turmoil. "Lisa is sick," he said, his voice trembling. "High fever, unbearable headaches. I'm bringing her here. Can you help me check her over?" "Of course," I agreed. It was an honor for me to lend a hand to the sister of a respected colleague like Dr. Geller. However, I suddenly had the feeling that this was no ordinary situation. When Lisa arrived at the hospital that evening, she was indeed very ill, with a pale face and dull eyes. The thermometer showed a fever of 39 degrees. Her body was bent with weakness, and every word she spoke was a whisper. "I've been like this since this morning," she murmured. "But the worst part is the dreams. I'm having very strange dreams. I keep seeing myself in the hospital, here." After completing her tests, we admitted her to one of the rooms on the upper floors to keep her under observation overnight. Lisa was placed in room 418 on the 4th floor. It was a single, windowed, and airy room. It felt like a quiet sanctuary, isolated from the outside world. We thought she would be more comfortable alone. Dr. Geller insisted on staying with his sister, but I gently sent him home. "Lisa is safe," I said, trying to convince myself. "Come back tomorrow morning well rested." I didn't know that that night, the walls of this sanctuary would be cast in the shadow of an invisible threat. During the night shift, Nurse Patricia came out of Lisa's room and approached me, her face twisted in confusion. She started rambling. She whispered, "She keeps asking, 'Where's Robert?' Then shouting, 'Robert's in danger.'" I knew the fever was playing tricks on her mind. However, a disturbing feeling had begun to grow inside me, that there might be a deeper meaning behind this nonsense. At 1:30 a.m., a sharp scream echoed from Lisa's room. My heart nearly stopped. I ran to her room, out of breath. Lisa was sitting upright in her bed, pointing at the window with a trembling finger. "Robert is there," she screamed, her voice shaking with panic. "He's in the car, having an accident. Help him." It was as if she were watching the events in the parking lot unfold in real time. I looked out the window and saw only the dimly lit emptiness of the hospital parking lot. There was nothing there. "Lisa, calm down," I said, trying to sound calm. "Robert is at home, safe." But Lisa wasn't even listening to me. Her eyes were fixed on the window, as if she were watching a scene unfold in that emptiness. "No, he's having an accident right now, in the blue car. There's so much blood. His leg is shattered." The details seemed etched into her mind with terrifying clarity. As the strange anxiety inside me grew, I decided to call Dr. Geller. I rang the phone once, twice, no answer. As my chest began to tighten, Lisa's words gnawed at my mind. Blue car, accident, blood ... A terrible premonition descended on my mind like a dark veil. Just then, at 2:15 a.m., the hospital's main phone rang with a shrill tone. The voice from the emergency room whispered a cold, harsh reality. "Dr. Martinez, there's an emergency. Dr. Robert Geller has been in a car accident. We're bringing him in by ambulance." I couldn't say a word. It felt like time had stopped. My breath had caught in my throat. How could Lisa have known? How could she be so certain? With trembling legs, I ran to Lisa's room. When I opened the door, she was still sitting on the bed, but this time there was a glimmer of relief in her eyes. "Robert is coming," I said, my voice shaking. "He's been in an accident, but he's on his way." Tears began to flow from Lisa's eyes. I knew it. I saw it. "He hit a blue car. His left leg is badly injured," she whispered, struggling to choose her words. How could she know such details? Was everything as she had seen it? When Dr. Geller was brought to the emergency room, his condition matched every detail Lisa had described. His left leg was severely injured, and he had collided with a blue car. He was taken to the operating room. The threads of his life were in the surgeon's hands. Meanwhile, Lisa's fever had miraculously begun to subside. It was as if the invisible bond between her and her brother had snapped at the moment of peak pain and danger. The surgery had been successful. Dr. Geller's leg had been saved, but a long and arduous recovery process lay ahead. Lisa, on the other hand, had fully recovered. Her fever had returned to normal, and all her tests came back clean. But what had happened that night remained etched in my mind as an unforgettable secret. Before she was discharged, I asked Lisa, "How did you know, Lisa? How did you see the incident so clearly?" Her eyes drifted off into the distance, as if she were reliving the entire event in her mind. "I don't know," she said, her voice a whisper. "It was like a dream, but it felt so real. I saw Robert in his car. He was scared. Then the crash happened, and I felt terrible, as if I were feeling his pain." When we spoke with Dr. Geller, he shared the same astonishment. "Lisa has always been like this," he said, a deep contemplative expression on his face. "She was like this even as a child. When I was sick, she would feel unwell too. My parents always said, they're like twins. But such a strong connection had never existed before." "What did you feel at the moment of the accident?" I asked Robert. His eyes focused out the window, as if on an invisible point. "It was strange," he began. "It felt like someone was warning me. I heard a voice saying, 'Watch out, Robert,' just seconds before the collision. Maybe if that voice hadn't been there, the outcome could have been much worse." After that night, I began to believe that the bond between twins was an inexplicable miracle that transcended the boundaries of medicine. Between Lisa and Robert, there was not just sibling love, but an invisible bond woven into the depths of their souls. A few months later, Dr. Geller fully recovered. Lisa never fell ill again after that night. "It was as if I bore Robert's pain," she said one day, her eyes filled with profound wisdom. "I became ill in his place so that he could be saved." It may not have made sense, but Lisa's words resonated as a truth in my mind. As you walk the hospital corridors, I want to remind you of this. Human bonds can sometimes be stronger than even medicine can explain, especially the invisible bonds between siblings, twins, even spouses. If a patient says something that seems illogical to you, don't dismiss it immediately. Listen, because sometimes love and devotion can be more healing than even the strongest medicine. That night with Lisa taught me about the depths of the human soul and the power of invisible bonds. Story 3. The Night Cafeteria. In the wide corridors of Metropolitan Hospital, as the silence of the night reigned, I, Sarah Mitchell, was working my shift in the heart of the cafeteria. I am 28 years old and have been one of the cogs in the wheel of this massive hospital, which operates 24 hours a day, non-stop, for 2 years. The night shift was routine for me, calm, usually alone, though the cafeteria, with its 200-person tables, resembled a vast, empty, and eerie hall at night. I had grown accustomed to this silence and solitude over time. That night, toward the end of October, was a Wednesday when the chill of the season was beginning to set in. At 10 p.m., as my shift began, the steam from freshly cooked soup, the aroma of the main course, and the freshness of the salad filled the cafeteria. Typically, after 11 p.m., the night staff doctors, nurses, security guards began to arrive one by one. This was a sign that it would be an ordinary night. At 11:30 p.m., our first guest arrived, Dr. Anderson from the emergency room. "It's going to be a long night," he said, with a weary smile. He took his tray and sat down at his favorite table in the corner. Then Nurse Janet and security guard Mike also arrived. Everything was proceeding as usual, like any other night. Until that moment. At 12:45 a.m., in the far corner of the cafeteria, under the dim lights, I noticed something odd. An elderly woman was sitting there. She was wearing a pale blue hospital gown, and her tray was empty. She was so quiet, it was as if she wasn't even there. I hadn't noticed when she had arrived or how she had sat down. She seemed like a presence that was barely there. I approached her slowly. "Would you like some food?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. The woman turned toward me. Her face was as pale as death, her eyes cloudy like frosted glass. "Agnes," she whispered, her voice sounding like an echo from afar. "My name is Agnes Miller." "Hello, Agnes," I said, trying to compose myself. "What would you like to eat?" The woman pointed to the empty tray. Soup, she said. I have soup here every night. I went to the kitchen and filled a bowl with hot soup. When I returned, the table was empty. Agnes was gone. Only the empty tray remained, alone where she had been sitting. How had she disappeared so quickly? I scanned the entire dining hall with my eyes, looking in every corner. She was gone. I saw a security guard Mike and ran over to him. Did you see an old woman? I asked, my voice trembling with anxiety. She was wearing blue pajamas, and her name was Agnes. Mike looked at me in astonishment. No one came in or out. Sarah. There was no one there. At that moment, the first seeds of a cold, hard truth were planted within me. At 1:15 a.m., that ghostly woman reappeared. She was sitting at the same table, as if she had never left. This time, I decided to follow her. I wanted to see how she got inside. I prepared her soup and brought it to her. "Thank you, dear," she said, her voice still carrying that strange echo. "Agnes," I asked, gathering my courage. "Which department are you from?" A sad smile appeared in her eyes. "I'm not a patient," she said. "I used to work here, in the cafeteria, just like you. But it's been a long time." My heart began to race wildly in my chest. "When did you work here?" "From 1987 to 2003, she replied, her voice filled with memories of the past. 16 years, then I retired. But this place was like my home. Every night, I'd come here and drink my soup. I've never forgotten the taste." What he said felt like a strange dream, but I felt like I was lost in that dream. I sat down at the computer and searched for the name Agnes Miller in the personnel records with trembling fingers. I found it. She had indeed worked here from 1987 to 2003 on the night shift in the cafeteria. But at the end of the record was a cold note, "Died in 2019. My world collapsed. If she had died in 2019, how was she now, in what form, standing before me? I hurried back to the dining hall. Agnes was still sitting there, sipping her soup, as if the terrible truth I had just read had never happened. "Agnes," I said, my voice catching in my throat, "you, ... In 2019. I died, yes, dear," she said, her voice still calm and echoing. "But this is my place. I come here every night, drink my soup. I don't harm anyone. I just miss the old days. This is where my happiest memories are." My breath caught in my throat. I was talking to a real ghost, eye to eye, word for word. "Are you afraid?" Agnes asked, never taking her eyes off mine. "No," I said, my voice filled with astonishment. "I'm just surprised." "Good," she said. "I'm not a bad person. I'm just lonely. I have no family, no friends. The years I worked here were the happiest days of my life. That's why I keep coming back." Her words touched my heart. Could even a ghost feel loneliness? Agnes finished her soup and placed the tray on the table. "Thank you, Sarah," she said, surprising me by using my name. "It was delicious soup." "How do you know my name?" I asked. "It's on your name tag," she smiled. "And you seem like a good girl. You must like this job as much as I do." This small interaction had created an odd connection between us. When the clock struck 2:30 a.m., Agnes slowly stood up. "I should go now," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "The morning shift is coming. I don't want to scare them." She walked slowly toward the door. For a moment she seemed to disappear, then reappeared, giving me one last look and a smile. "I'll come back tomorrow night," she said, and vanished completely. I couldn't believe my eyes, but there was an indescribable peace within me. When the morning shift arrived, I told my boss Maria about what had happened that night. She nodded, her face showing understanding. "I remember Agnes," she said calmly. "She was a very good woman. I knew she had passed away, but she won't harm anyone. She just misses this place." Maria's calmness surprised me. It was as if such things were commonplace in hospitals. After that night, I began to see Agnes frequently. Every night, at the same table, the same soup. We talk. She tells me about her days in the hospital, the turning points in her life. I no longer fear her. Agnes is just a lonely spirit. This cafeteria has become a haven where she finds peace. I have a piece of advice for all my colleagues who work in cafeterias. In such places, you may encounter spirits from the past. Do not be afraid. Most are harmless. They just seek peace in familiar places. Be respectful and understanding toward them, because perhaps they only need a friend, a warm soup, and someone to listen to them. Remember, some stories continue even after death, and we may be witnesses to those stories.